Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to tone the paper. We're going to make what's called a continuous tone drawing. And so again, when you go to drawing 3, figure drawing we'll work with a medium value. So I need a grayscale, please. That's good. Okay. I'm going to work with a medium value, somewhere between 5 and 6 here. Okay. And you're going to tone the whole paper with that medium value. So that takes care of a lot of mark making for you. It takes care of a lot of work. So what is left for you to do to complete the drawing? If you have the midtones, then you need
shadows,
highs and lows. Yep, darks and lights. Okay, high key, low key. All right. So to get more dense, you're going to add more charcoal powder. And for the densest application, you need your greasiest pencils. That would be the highest Bs. Here's an 8B. That would be greasier. That would give the appearance of dark. And then for the lightest values, how are you going to indicate that?
eraser.
You're going to erase. You're going to erase a little to a lot, and everything from in between. Okay, and here's where we can cut these erasers for a sharper edge with the razor blade. And if it gets dirty and grubby, which it will, you can cut and slice a new edge onto this. Be careful, don't cut on the tops of these drawings. Any cutting on top of this will create a mark, and if you have a piece of paper on top of that, you'll have a mark in your drawing. Any rough edges will show up. Okay? All right, so we can cut little chunks and slices off of this. You can cut a little triangular piece off of this. So these are for carving into, but when you have a nice sharp edge here, then that gives you a really nice edge to use. Okay, when they're all rounded, then you need to sharpen it up again. And again, you can cut the corner like this. Okay, you don't have to cut a whole big chunk off, but then that little chunky take off is also can be used to erase. So I'm going to show you some erasing techniques to get lighter values. And the kneaded erasers you get out of the pack. You don't use that as the rectangle that comes in the pack. The kneaded eraser means, anybody know how to bake bread? Knead dough? Okay, well, it's sort of like that, but what you do is you stretch and move this around so that it's self-cleaning, okay? And at a certain point, it'll become very saturated, so you'll just have to pitch it and move on to a new one. But don't throw it away. Okay, you can mold this and shape this so that one of those that get fully saturated with pigment, make it flat, and it becomes a molding tool, becomes a tool to manipulate and create a nice continuous tone. Soft edges. Soft edges, okay? So the same thing, wherever you see hard edges, you're going to have a hard edge in your drawing. Wherever you see a soft edge, you're going to model it, okay? And create soft edges, all right? So we don't want to carve out abrupt changes, only where we see abrupt changes, and we want to have those soft edges, okay? And we want degrees of lightness and darkness. So we're really going to stretch out this grayscale now. This is a very small grayscale for us to use, which is only a 10-step, 11-step grayscale. Okay? Imagine if you had 20, 25, 35 values. I think I told you at one point how many different values can the human eye detect. Do you remember how many? 144. That's without machine help. A machine can detect even more value changes. So we can create a lot of subtlety. Okay, the fewer the values, the more flat your image will appear to be. So we don't want flatness, we want the illusion of volume, of depth, of roundness. So that means the opposite is going to be true. The more values you have, the more subtle changes between light and dark, the more illusion of volume and dimension you will create. So now compared to the beginning of the semester when we just did contour drawings, by now we're starting to see a real contrast. You're starting to get the effects of more and more and more illusion. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the more ability you have to create that verisimilitude. Verisimilitude is the perception that you're looking at a real thing as close as you can get it. So now, this is the finesse stage of the semester. Take a look at the baby back there in the drawing. And there are subtle changes, gradual changes, and there are abrupt changes because we're looking at the object and we're rendering hard edges where we see the hard edges, soft edges where we see the soft edges, and we're paying very close attention to the value structure. Remember, this value scale, by squinting, will help you decide what value and the correct value. Okay. Now I put up there deceptive subject matter. You've got black paper that isn't black. You've got white fruit that isn't white wooden fruit. And you have paper bags that are not white. Okay? So there's deception up there. The only way to tell what values you're looking at is to use this value scale and to see what the actual value is. Okay? Common mistakes. Folks render those wooden fruits way too dark, or the opposite, way too light. Okay? You have to pay attention to how many different grays, lights and darks. Okay. I'm going to talk you through this and then I'm going to show you how it works. And then, because the paper white will become very stained, okay, and you'll never get back to this paper white. You can erase and you can erase and you can erase, and you can pick up most of the graphite and in turn most of the charcoal. But you really will have to work on that. Your hard rubber erasers are really the workhorses of removing pigment. The rubber erasers are to create the subtlety of blending. And also will perhaps get in places that you can't get otherwise, okay? It will take whatever shape you mold this to, okay? So, when you see the crispiest white highlights, okay, that's where the paper has been erased to the maximum, and it can't get any whiter, but it needs to go whiter, so we use that white charcoal. Okay, you don't use it on top of gray or graphite. You use it on paper that has been completely erased. If it hasn't been completely erased, you'll get these gray smears, which don't look too good. Okay, so this is kind of the opposite of what we just came from with the hatching. Okay, we do have that sense of 3-dimension with some of those beautiful drawings that you've been producing here. Subtle changes, especially when you squint your eyes, you can see gradual changes from light to dark. And here, now you have even more opportunity because it's a quicker execution than the hatching. Okay? But we have no marks in these drawings. Do you see that? Yeah, so that's the discipline here with a continuous tone. I want you to, with your erasers, which are the most of your drawing is going to be done with the erasers. And by the way, to remove pigment from the surface, it's called subtractive. Okay? So it's a subtractive technique. So for the darker parts, the denser parts, you're going to want to use graphite powder, and you're going to want to use the graphite crayons. And the softer, the higher the B, the softer, and potentially darker the graphite. Okay, so that's additive. When you mark onto the paper, it's additive. When you remove from the paper, that's called subtractive. So it's kind of a yin and yang, give and take. So you're going to want to add and subtract, add and subtract. Okay? I'll show you some more examples here after I do a rendering exercise. Okay, so now I'm actually going to start. I'll put my tools up here for right now. You want to keep your grayscale out, and I have other handouts for you to use, and you don't need very much of this. Okay. And again, you don't want to get this on the floor. Graphite is a lubricant, and it will make things very slippery. Okay, so we're going to tone the paper. And move that trash can over here for me. Thank you. So I'm going to move it around on my surface here and tone the paper, and you can see with the toning exercise, it's creating some streaks. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of the excess graphite here. Okay, so you can see how streaky and strokey this is, so I want to get rid of that. So now I'm going to the circular motion here and try and get rid of any of that mark making. And so if you want to, you can just create a demonstration piece for yourself here if you want, just to try. It's always a good idea to just kind of try the media out before you start your drawing. And you may just want to stain your, let's see what happens if we do this. Ooh, that's kind of nice. See that? Use the heel of my hand. Okay. So there's two very different kinds of tones. Okay, so two very different tones. We can also, you can start anywhere on the value scale. Obviously, we have started with white paper for most of the semester. So if you look at master drawings, you can see that a lot of them were done on toned paper. And if you don't have toned paper, like my students in the figure drawing class, some of them didn't go by the toned paper. So that makes it easier. It's already pigmented. So they have to tone their paper to get the same effects, the same kind of discipline. So it is a way of creating just with the light marks and just with the dark marks. So, okay. The more you have to erase, then the more work there is too. Okay, so with toned paper, you don't have to do any work, and it's evenly toned. So it takes a little bit of practice to get a nice tone to the paper. Okay, so we can, in the past we've done, again, subtractive hatching, right? So, again, you can erase a little bit. So I can erase a little, even pressing into the surface picks up. can erase a little. You do not want to do a white contour line drawing, right? And if you mess up, you just retone the paper, add a little bit more graphite. Okay. So if I want to do a sketch on here first, then I can very lightly gesture in. Okay, all this is going to be smoothed out. Okay. So I can start to go to work on no contour, right? So I can see pretty much where my fruit is going to be, and I'm going to figure out, you know, when I finesse this object, I'm going to adjust. It's a perfect value right there. The main body at the front of the apple is this number 6, so I can match that right here, this front part. So I'm lifting out gradually, and the technique that I'm using, I call it you scoot your tools around, so that it's not this is what you don't want to do. Remember, I used kind of painting the walls with a roller, where you have to get those perfect straight lines. Yeah, we want a little scooting technique. So I'm not creating any strong direction with it. Y'all see that? See that kind of technique where I'm going to block out the shape of the apple and make sure I don't have strong contours, strong lines, strong directions. And my kneaded eraser is just perfect for that. Did you see how I flattened that? Yeah. And you can also, I'm not going to do it to your eraser, but I would also love to cut a chunk off like this, you know, a little rectangular chunk, and use that to scoot around also. So I would work, I'd dedicate one of these erasers to just chunks, and then when the side gets dirty, and lots of times I'll just take and work off the extra on my apron, okay? And when that gets so dirty, then I can cut the sliver layer off of that chunk and keep working with it. Yeah. There it is. And again, once this eraser gets fully saturated, then I can use that to deposit pigment. And I love this kind of modeling. This kind of modeling just completely absorbs me. I just love the magic of watching this develop into a realistic object. It's so much fun. But I'm going to work this from start to finish here. But what you want to do is, again, like I started with a sketch, you're going to sketch your whole drawing. And you're going to start, you're going to work from medium to light and medium to dark. Okay? So work all through. Start with a medium, next lightest value on your value scale, and lift out a little bit all over. Then lift out a little bit more all over. So you keep the entire drawing developing equally. Okay? Don't do what I'm doing in the demonstration, starting with a single object and work it from start to finish. Okay? You want to have relationships that you see are developing correctly. You don't want to lift out too much, okay? And you want to lift out enough. So you want to do it gradually. So you have a comparison. This apple is lighter than the piece of black paper next to it. So you know when to stop lifting out for the black paper, and you continue to lift out for the apple. Okay, you must have those relationships created. Do you see how I just scooted my finger over there and took away that line that I put where it didn't belong? Okay. Here's the shadow, the little edge. For the edges, I'm going to use, if there's a line, then you want to put the line there. But this one changes value, so it goes from brighter to darker. Easy to correct your mistakes. I need a little bit of graphite here to help create that shape. Look at what a beautiful soft edge that created. And then the reason we see that apple pop out is because of the contrast of whatever value the sheet is in this area. The reason we see the edge of that shadow is because of the white of the sheet. So you see what I mean by value relationships between the objects, between the areas. Sorry. And I would break a chunk about this big off my graphite, and again use a piece of scrap paper or your sandpaper, which creates a flat side. So the whole flat side makes contact with your paper. That's why you want to flatten it out. Okay, work it so it's flat, and then I would come in and use to create darker darks. Again, not strokes, but you scoot the tools around. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
You have to start with the highlights first, so can we start with the shadows?
You're going to start with the medium. You're going to work the medium.
Yeah, and
Yes.
after you tone the paper, do you have to start with the eraser, or do you can start with shadows?
Yes. Start with the eraser so that you have value relationships. So you kind of have to work. I okay? I can't work the light of this until I start to work the dark of this, so you're working both simultaneously. Okay, so you what goes on last? Your absolute white, crispy highlights. And I'm gonna not be able to finish this fruit for you. If you had an hour to stand here and watch me, you would do that, okay? But I'm not gonna make you do that. What I'm gonna do is get these edges close to their value, and then I'm gonna work a white highlight up here in the edge for you. So you will begin to see how challenging it is to get a white highlight after all of this grubbiness. But I love the immediate subtlety that it creates. I'm going to do a little bit more. Value right in there. And most people that draw on the iPad love to just use their fingers. And you can see how, at least my technique is a lot of finger movement. So this will be, if you're using an iPad watching this video, this is exactly how you would be applying your pigment. So it's a real direct extension of what we're doing in this class. Okay, now I'm going to move that. Oops. Thank you. And you can carve it out, and you can come back and smooth it out to make more of a beautifully blended, continuous tone. Okay, so white highlights. I just want, I have to erase that more. It looks like a pasty gray. Okay, so I really would have to get in there with the sharp edge of my eraser, and really let's try to dig that out just to show you. Okay, really. You see that white pop on the surface. Okay, so you want to be very reserved with using this. You don't want to go in there and blend grays. It's not that type of a drawing execution. All of your value comes from paper tone. This is only for the white crispy highlight.